So I think we might as well start. I think some people are going to be drift back from their coffee excursions as I did. And some people have headed out late in the afternoon. But let's go ahead and get started. I think this session is going to work well as in a smaller conversational context anyway. I'm eager to hear what you have to say and what other people suggest. So why don't you go ahead and begin whenever you're ready, and I'll watch the admission list.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. Cheryl and I are really happy to be here and are going to try to do some pedagogical experiments through the Zoom platform. So we will all be, mindful and sensitive that it's always a different thing when we're in the room together than when we're on Zoom. But I guess, Cheryl, do you want me to just introduce myself? Do you want to introduce yourself? I'm Wendy, everyone. I teach at Queens College in New York City in an English education program. The very, very start of my career, I was a high school teacher, and that seems to have informed just so much about kind of everything that I do subsequent. I will now pass the mic to someone who is an active high school teacher.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cheryl. I have taught high school English for 25 years now, so I can't get out. Well, maybe. I think that's about all.
To start today, we're going to kind of divide this up into two sections. Partially because I'm here in Amherst helping with the NEH program that the museum's doing with teachers. So I'm going to need to run at about 4. So the first part, you should see a link to a pretty short Dickinson poem and a link to something called Padlet in the chat. Does everyone see that? Can also put it back in if you just joined. Let me add it back. Do you see that? Can you raise your hand if you do not see the 2 links in the chat? Okay. I am putting the poem and I am putting the Padlet.
Do you want me to do that again?
I think I just did. I think I managed from my old iPad. So I really wanted to do something called Exploding a Poem with everyone today. I'm not sure how it's going to work over the Zoom format. So I think maybe just to start, I'd love to read the poem, We Should Not Mind So Small a Flower, aloud. And then I'll kind of read the room and see if I feel like trying to adapt the strategy that's very much meant for a group of people sitting in a circle. The next thing that I'll ask you to do is to update our Padlet. We'd really love to collect the poems that bring you joy, the Dickinson poems that bring you joy, and also some of the strategies that you might use or have used in teaching Dickinson that have given you or your students joy. So we'll get to that in a second. But can everyone pull up We Should Not Mind So Small a Flower? Does everyone have that in front of them? Okay, what I would like to do, so something that I would do with students is to read this in a few different ways, to read it to the end of a line, to read it to punctuation, and to read it backwards. So from the last line to the front line or to the first line. I think to start, since we're on Zoom, I would like to just invite us to experiment a little. And if we're speaking over each other, we'll just be okay with that. I would like to invite all of us to read to the line. So I'll read the first line, and whoever wants to jump in and read the second line, please just unmute yourself, and we'll go like that until we're done with the poem. Does that make sense? So okay, so I'm we'll require audience participation here. So the first line of this poem, We should not mind so small a flower.
Accepted quiet bring. Our little garden that we lost.
Back to the lawn again.
So spicy her carnation's not.
So drunken reel the bees.
So silver steal 100 flutes. 100 trees.
That whoso sees this little flower
By faith may clear behold.
The bobolinks around the throne.
And dandelions gold.
Yay, everyone. Poetry snapping. Let's do this one more time, and let's do it now to punctuation. So this in this poem could be one of her dashes, or it could be a comma. Otherwise, you'll follow the line until you find a piece of punctuation. Does anyone want to kick us off with the first stanza?
We should not mind so small a flower, except it quiet bring our little garden that we lost back to the lawn again.
So spicy her carnations nod.
So drunken reel her bees.
So silver steal 100 flutes from out 100 trees.
That whoso sees this little flower by faith may clear behold the bobolinks around the throne and dandelions gold.
Thank you. The next time you would do this, we could also pause at the commas too, so we hear the lines and the language even differently. But let's end by going backwards. So we'll start with "and dandelions gold" and go up to the first line, and we'll then sort of unpack a little bit before moving to the Padlet. Does anyone want to start us off with "and dandelions gold"?
And dandelions gold.
The bobolinks around the throne.
Thy face may clear behold.
That whoso sees this little flower
From out 100 trees.
So silver steal 100 flutes.
So drunken reel her bees.
So spicy her carnations nod.
Back to the lawn again.
Our little garden that we lost.
Except it quiet bring.
We should not mind so small a flower.
Thank you. What did you notice in reading this poem in these three different ways? What stuck out to you? It could be images, it could be sounds, it could be the process itself. Any observations or thoughts?
They become separate ideas.
What's the they in that sentence? The lines? Is that what you mean, Don?
I mean, like each image is separate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're out of context.
Okay, so you see the images in a different, maybe more distinct way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in the relation between the commas and the dashes. How are they different? Which causes for the commas suggest that you're supposed to stop but realize that the two are connected. The dashes, at least in my mind, I want to know if people agree with this, suggest a bit more distance. What do you think?
What do others think?
Sure.
I mean, a part of getting especially younger students to read to punctuation, whether it's dash, comma, period, is so that they can start hearing the words, the language a little differently, rather than reading it all the way through and not stopping. And then, different kinds of beats and rhythms make themselves known. It also really depends on the poem, I think, too. Other thoughts? What was it like reading it upside down or backwards?
I heard the rhymes even more distinctly backwards.
Which is interesting, right?
The dashes call more attention to themselves precisely because they're more unusual. Many poems by other poets have commas, but dashes, while I'm not claiming Dickinson is the only person who uses them, they're sort of distinctively associated with her in my mind.
Mhm.
It's also remarkable how much sense the poem makes read backwards.
Yeah.
Which is part of the hearing each image as a separate thing. And so in that sense, you can shake them up. But
I have a somewhat different perspective because I write parodies of Dickinson. Some of you have made read them because there have been a lot of them in the bulletin. So I always have to ask myself, do I want to use her dashes or not? And if so, why? And that really gets me very involved in thinking about the poem.
What do you think? I mean, thinking about both the dashes and the fact that we could read the poem backwards or upside down and it still makes sense, or it still makes a kind of sense. Does anyone have any other observations or thoughts about that? No.
well, I mean, I think this is a poem that has a big idea at the beginning, and then it has kind of a lot of different flowers and a lot of different natural things expressing that idea. And so part of the reason that the poem works in both directions is that she also does have poems that will begin with lots of particulars and then come to a generalizing insight. So, in a sense, the logic of the poem works in either direction.
Yeah, I think that's very well said.
And one thing I noticed just in reading it with punctuation, especially, as opposed to reading it line by line, is that the pacing changes a lot. And obviously the middle stanza is more broken up with 3 lines ending in dashes. And then if you were to add in those commas as pauses as well, though it would sound weird, it would be a lot more chopped up, whereas the first and third stanzas are unbroken and they start with this almost the same line. And so it's like detail between 2 generalizations or something like that.
That's helpful because then that reading strategy then helped you notice something about the way the middle stanza was working differently.
They also call attention to syntax. So with the so drunken, real her bees.
Yeah.
But could the carnations be drunk? So silver,
right?
Steal 100 flutes from out 100 trees. And of course, there are a lot of S sounds in there.
Yeah.
But the so silver catches my eye in that we're talking about flowers. And I'm wondering, the silver image, I'm only getting a vague sense of.
Yeah, what Emily
we're in the
is,
wormwood family.
what Emily is saying, it makes me read that middle stanza with which Dickinson does so much, where the syntax sort of shifts back and forth, syntactic doubling, Chris called it ages ago. But where, so it's almost like a constant shifting of attention from one thing to another rather than perpetuating developing syntax. That holds together. And it's what was the line, Renee, from the poem that you quoted where she moves between thought and notice and like they're 2 completely separate processes that are nevertheless conjoined and interdependent?
Yeah, she said, I was thinking today as I noticed that the supernatural is only the natural disclosed. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is almost like a poem about thinking and noticing. Is 2 separate but interconnected things.
Before we move on to Padlet, I'd love to invite others who haven't contributed or noted an observation, or maybe now another idea that's come to you after hearing others. Anyone else have anything to add?
It kind of turns into word soup. So all the stuff that was connected one way is now connected up to something else another way, and they're all sort of spilled together. So it takes it out of a story or a string of images and just like puts all the images randomly together,
Yeah,
which
that
is
is
cool.
so cool.
I was gonna say
Mm.
just the opposite.
Well, cool.
To me, all of this is brings home to me the her ending image, the dandelion's gold, that to me is surrounded by the kind of halo of bobolinks and is the to me it's at the center of the poem, that it comes at the end and then you reinterpret things from that. So as everybody has shuffled the deck in different ways, more and more for me as I look at the poem, the dandelion stands out.
Am I the only person?
They're coordinated activities, and sometimes Dickinson's endings are famously sometimes I think she has trouble landing her poems. But this one, there's a very definite dandelion there.
Yeah, it's not sort of disintegrating. It's landing in a very clear way on some
Except
level.
it's not there yet.
I'm
Am
trying
I
to
the only
remember.
person who had a Google bobolink? This is a bit embarrassing. I didn't know what a bobolink was. I had to Google it.
Ivy is trying to talk. And
Yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ivy.
Well, the bobolink, I mean, that's one of her favorite birds because of the song. But what I wanted to say, and I'm sorry, I'm sick, which is why I've been turning my video off. She says in a letter somewhere about reading poems backwards.
She does?
Dickinson herself, yes. And and I'm trying to remember who she writes the letter to. And I think it's about an Elizabeth Barrett Browning poem.
Oh, wow.
And she says, "Well, have you ever tried to read it backward? You should read it backwards." So I'm just thinking for this technique that you have, it might be fun to find that letter.
Yes.
Because Dickinson herself recommends that we read poems backwards.
Yeah.
So anyway, that
Thank you so much for contributing that. I had no idea, and it also makes complete sense that she would say that.
If I can find it, because I know I've read it somewhere. I have a very clear memory of seeing it at the Morgan exhibit too.
Yeah.
So if somebody can go back to that
Renee
one.
just put it in the chat, I think.
Oh, did you find it? Yeah. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay.
Yep, there it is.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyway, so
what a wonderful statement.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The plunge from the front overturned you.
Right.
Mhm.
Oh, I love that.
I think Browning.
So in doing this strategy with the teachers last week, as a way to also get them to model with their students, one of the things that we were talking about is just that students are so often scared of poems, or that because poetry is taught that there's a way of approaching it or a way of understanding, that all of these strategies that were decentering or inviting play were both fun for us to do as adults, but they were excited to work with poetry like this with their students at the start of the year, just so that it could be more process oriented, and also kind of what you said, Dawn, that there's not that it's word soup, but that you can sort of get inside it in a different kind of way than if you are just reading it in the same way over and over again from top to bottom. So in the spirit of play, I would love it if you could click on the Padlet link. You should have access. There should be a little plus sign in the right-hand corner that will allow you to create a post. And you should see two examples from me there. There's both something about the Explode the Poem activity that I wanted to do, but I was too scared to try it with you all on Zoom. There's
I'm sorry, Wendy, but I joined a little late. I apologize.
Let me copy it for you.
Did you
Sorry.
put the link in the chat before I came?
Yes.
It's still in there. It's still in. If you scroll back up, it's still there.
I just added it again. Sorry about that, Eliza.
That's okay. No, it isn't still there, Emily. It's here again. Once if you
You
join,
see it?
you'll get to see the early stuff.
We got it.
You got it? Okay. So I want everyone to take a minute.
This is Benigno on Karen's image. Since we're backing up a bit, translators do this kind of back and forth all the time as a matter of discipline. We can't count on word order as being the final shape of the translated piece. So therefore, we do this all the time.
Interesting. As a way to, can you say more about how it helps you in the translation process? I'm very interested.
Well, it's sometimes if you're playing with rhyme or playing with rhythm, sometimes you can't. You have to use as many possible ways of walking away from the order the poet gave you, so that you have a little more leeway to reconstruct the sense and the feel. And so rearranging the whole stanza, it's a very time-honored process that translators, we have to use it all the time.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I had no idea. The same thing with Dickinson saying that we should read poems backwards. I feel like we're opening up a different window into her composition, but also that's very interesting to think about. That is a really important method of translation. Thank you so much for sharing that. Did everyone access the Padlet okay? Are you Padleting right now?
Well, what are we to do?
So you should see two kind of example posts that are up with instructions. Do you see that? You can either post a poem, a Dickinson poem that brings you joy, and you can describe why. You can link to it, or you can name its number. You don't have to necessarily copy and paste the whole poem in there. But so just so we can have a little bit of an archive from our conversation and something that we can share back out. I'd love to have this is something that Cheryl and I were talking about when we had a session thinking about this earlier in the spring. We really wanted to collect your joyful poems, or the poems that give you joy in relation to Dickinson. And also, so you can do that. That's one. The second part you could do is, if there's a particular strategy kind of similar to what we did, or something very different that you have used with students to impart joy or play in relation to reading a poem that you would like to describe for us, please add that too. So you can do one or both. That makes sense?
Yeah, I'm going to need a few minutes here.
Sure. Yeah. Take your time. You have time. Elizabeth.
Do we click on add comment?
Mm-hmm.
I apologize. I'm joining a little late, so I'm just wondering if Wendy, you could
copying
just pop that link to the Padlet in the chat, maybe?
Yes, I just copied it back again.
Thank you.
You see it?
Yeah.
Have you all used Padlet before? Has anyone not used it?
Never heard of it.
Nope.
This is something that became really important during the pandemic because you can do quite a lot of things with it, and it's gotten a little more sophisticated and I think easier to use, but you'll tell me if you think that's true. You can link to, moving images in your post. You can make it very multimodal. With both my students and the teachers I'm working with this week, I had them do a multimodal Padlet. So they had to make a connection between a Dickinson poem and something else. So all the different songs and movies and books that they connected to were just really fun to see in a shared space.
I just posted, excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just posted something and I want to know if it got in.
Okay, let me take a look.
Thank you very much.
There it is.
I see it.
Thanks.
Felicia and Nimue.
Thank you very much. Sorry I cut you off.
And there's Emily. T-shirt analysis.
You did not cut me off. Thank you for your question. So take a few minutes, take your time with this, and then we'll discuss a little and move into Cheryl's.
Heavens, people are really going for it. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to focus. What are they doing? They're going for what? They're following these instructions.
Leanne, do you have, I think you are not muted, just in case you had thought you were. Can you hear me?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, okay. If you have a question though, please
Wendy,
let me know.
I'm sorry, but I'm a little lost. Do I just hit the little green post thing on the bottom?
Yes.
And
yes,
just respond to any assignment that way?
Yeah, you can, that won't even be a response. You'll be adding your joyful poem, or you'll be adding your joyful teaching strategy. So you'll see something that says Eliza, and then you'll add your content that way. So,
but there's only one green thing. So the post is for any
yes.
of it. Okay.
Yeah, click that. You won't break Padlet. Click it and see, and you should see see a little post pull up and give you options. Do you see that?
No. Well, I'll submit what I just did.
Are you Windward Voyager?
Yeah, I didn't put my name. I'm Windward Voyager.
Okay, I see it. If you want to add Windward Voyager, if you want to say what gives you joy, you can add that. You can edit the post, or you can add it in a comment right below it.
Thanks.
Yeah, for those who are posting poems, please definitely add a few sentences. Doesn't have to be more than that, just about what specifically gives you joy, because it may not actually be obvious. Or the other way of saying that is your experience with it might be really important to all of us to see. As you do this, the last thing I want to say is, if you're done, if you've posted and you want to read through all of the other posts that are there, you should be able to comment, so you can say something that you appreciate or like about someone else's. You can give it a heart, so you can engage with each other's.
Okay. So I just posted a Dickinson poem that gives me joy, but nothing about how to teach it.
That's okay. There's those two options, and I'm not giving anyone a grade. I promise.
What I really enjoyed about the first exercise, reading it backwards and stuff, and I don't do much of that. Certainly, I've never read the poem backwards, but it would work with students at all levels, because it draws you away from trying to make sense of the poem at first, and you just look at the way it's laid out, and then all of a sudden these features of it just go boom, like, and the golden flowers.
Gold. Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Dan. I mean, I think to disorientate students a little bit, but also to pause the meaning making. The attempt to read a poem once and say, oh, this is a poem about X, which bypasses all kinds of things. This playful reading in all the directions just doesn't allow students to do that immediately.
So that's always been, for me, the best thing about teaching Dickinson anyway, because they never have any idea what it's all about. So you can talk about what and then all of a sudden they'll start, boom, getting ideas about it.
Just a time check. Would we like a few more minutes to look at the Padlet and respond to it, or would we like to discuss it? What are you all feeling?
Be
I think I need more
mused.
time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wendy.
Okay, good. Take
I'm
more
trying
time,
to
Harry.
Me
find
too.
home.
I'm feeling bemused.
Okay. Take more time.
Okay, so let me do a teaching strategy, which is going to be pretty pedestrian after what you've done, but
Okay.
I doubt it.
Okay.
Sorry if I've thrown a complex Padlet exercise in the spirit of joy at everyone.
Which I think is interesting to think about because as a Zoom room full of learned adults, you can imagine what introducing a Padlet to 30, 15-year-olds is like, which is why I always kind of like this is going to need a lot of scaffolding if they try to get my students to start at the bottom and go up and just interject. It'd be bedlam. So for me, so it was, I think a bit of scaffolding that would have to happen before, and once they're used to the process, then you can hit the ground running. But I think it would require a bit of scaffolding for my students.
Cheryl, do you mean for the Padlet or for the reading in different directions?
For reading in different directions, because as much as it takes away the pressure of meaning making, it's also the complete inverse of what they've been told to do, which can be a great tool, but it's going to be very disorienting for them, and that could cause a little bit of anxiety. And what are you doing? Maybe not so much for manga readers that are used to reading texts in different ways, but
that's interesting. With my former high school students, I had the opposite experience, which was all the pressures to be smart or to sound correct when we would do these kinds of strategies, they didn't feel. And so they would engage a little bit more or a little bit differently because they didn't feel the pressure of doing it quote unquote right. But I think you're totally right in terms of scaffolding. And I think in every way we read a poem, there needs to be particular scaffolding for particular students.
and certainly, and I think it also depends on the student population that you're working with.
I've had the same experience with needing to tell them that, like, explicitly, or they get freaked out at the at transgressing whatever they think they're expected to do.
Thank you so much, everyone who's posting. I'm seeing really great connections to poems that bring you joy and also strategies that are really interesting and engaging. Can we talk a little bit before we move on? Would anyone like to say a little bit more about the poem that they've added and why it gives you joy?
Well, Johnny and I hit on the same one, but I see Eliza raising her hand, so I yield.
Okay, Eliza, and then we'll go to Emily and Johnny.
Oh, well, okay. I find this poem, this is a poem that I've loved since I first started reading Dickinson in college. It's one of the first ones I understood in a revelatory form completely. And Renee was talking about revelation earlier, and it was startling to me because it's such a complicated poem, and it's not a poem that I would give to the students first unless I had some kind of elaborate plan for it. But her basic comparison between communion with language and communion with in terms of religious doctrine really hit home for me, and gave me a sense of the possibilities of reading Dickinson, because she's encouraging individual interpretation. And she herself is saying, you read the very food debated for your specific strengths. So it suggests that every person can open up the poems in their own way. So I think this poem gave me permission to write my honors thesis on Emily Dickinson and fail in lots of ways, but partially understand the poems and explore them that way. And it's become a lifetime activity for me. And that's how I approach this with the students. The idea that you don't have to understand every single thing in a Dickinson poem. You can, like, which phrase stands out for you and why? What's wrong with partial understanding? And the desire to continue to learn and explore, and open up that experience over time, and those sorts of things. So this poem is one that I would give later in a semester teaching Dickinson, and the students would then come to understand it in that way, I think. So that's just the beginning of something. I just love the idea of having an equal relationship with language also, rather than it being somehow something you need to strive to live up to. It releases some of the pressure that way also.
Isn't partial understanding all we ever have?
No, I get it all.
That is true.
Liar.
I see.
That's why you're the president.
Yeah.
Yes, and exactly. I think that's right. And whatever zone we're in, we understand things in a particular way, and that too is partial, and we come back to it from another perspective. And that's very true for Dickinson's poems over years and over the space of 24 hours. So yeah, and I think that's something that students love once they enter that zone of flexibility.
I see Ivy's hand was up, and then we'll go to Dawn. And I know, Emily, also you and Johnny want to talk about your choice.
I didn't put a poem in just because I have to leave, and I'm as I said, I'm not feeling well, so I'm only partially brain wise here. But I wrote an essay which is going to in Martha Nell's new collection on teaching Dickinson, which has just been delayed and delayed and delayed. But anyway, it's an essay in which I argue that Dickinson teaches us to unlearn how we have learned to read for meaning in this binary way. And it really situates Dickinson in a tradition of unlearning, I call it, which involves various philosophers like Paulo Freire. And I'd love to share that. It was supposed to get out in this collection, but it just hasn't seen the light of day. But I'd love to post that somewhere, because it really comes out of my experience of teaching Dickinson to seventh graders, and the amazing kind of questions that they ask. So if there's, let me know, Wendy and Cheryl, if there's a way to kind of, I'd love to, contribute it, because it's got great examples, and I think it makes an important point that I've kind of garnered from years of listening to people talk about teaching Dickinson and teaching Dickinson myself. So, but I've loved everything you've done here. It's so much fun to be playful, and not to be tyrannized by the need to understand or to make meaning of these poems. So I think you're on the right track. So
thank you, Ivy, and please share that with us whenever.
Let me see if I can put it. Let me see if I can put it in the chat.
Dawn.
So I think, if memory serves, there's a term called ekphrastic, which has to do with writing a poem about a painting, which I think you guys are very word oriented, but we were talking about joy and the thing that would exponentially explode the possibilities for meaning would be to reverse that. And I don't think there's a word for that, which would be to look at Dickinson through music, to look at her through dance, to look at her through visual arts, right? To present, when I do Dickinson readings about the music, and I do get to do it occasionally, I play different styles of music, and that everybody in the audience, one guy goes like, oh, I hate country, or one guy goes, oh, I really love classical, or one guy, and so it connects up to the words and the meaning. It explodes the possibilities for meaning beyond just reciting words.
One of my Dickinson poems was set to music, and parodies, I mean.
Yeah, I think that's also, Donna, a really important point. I mean, obviously this is, we're doing just a few strategies here and it's on Zoom, but I'm sure we all here have had various strategies that ask students to visualize or to think about something in relation to music. I have this strategy that I would use with, these were first year college students, but as a way to get them into close reading in a more playful way. They would have to choose a stanza, a particularly difficult stanza of a given poem, and then translate it into a different form. And they could choose which form that could be. It could be another language, it could be visual language, it could be musical language. And then they would present their translations. And then they would work on the more academic stuff once they were having a little fun with it. Emily and then Dan?
Well, on the music front, I actually had Greg Kaler come to our campus and do a concert, and he did a workshop with my students. This was something he was doing for a while, where he and a soprano he was working with would do workshops for students about how you might set a song. And because he's such a good improviser, he asked my students, okay, how do you hear this particular poem? And I had one student who said, well, I hear it as something being sung by Axl Rose. And he launched into doing it. I hear it as a blues song. He launched into doing that. And the different musical settings are just wonderful. There are at least 30 settings of Wild Nights, and they are, if you will, wildly different. I mentioned in talking about I Cannot Dance Upon My Toes, Leo Smith's setting of that, which is this waltz setting, and I'll let Johnny talk about that particular poem. But another thing that I really enjoy doing is something that Suzanne Uhas had us do in Boulder, and that's to perform a poem in a non-serious way. And it was there that I launched the telling the story of my death. I heard a fly buzz when I died, and going on with that. So hearing it in a different voice, or Because I Could Not Stop for Death is something out of a Tennessee Williams play. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. So that you kind of create the drama, the story, but you also, in hearing it in a completely different voice, hear it in a different way. So that Alice Walker said you have models that you model yourself after, and then you have models that you resist, that you don't want to model. And so when there's something jangly about the way in which the poem is said or sung or performed, that in itself is revelatory.
If I can cut in real quick, while we're on this context, we just did a concert a couple of weeks ago with the Dickinson Ensemble, and I asked a dancer to come in and dance to the music, and I was absolutely moved and surprised and heartbroken by seeing her interpret my music and Emily Dickinson's words in ways I had never even imagined. Her face was so expressive, and I walked away from it going, I was schooled by this ability for a dancer to bring something to it that you can't put into words.
I had a student who was a dancer who, as her final project, the final project was a Dickinson montage. And her montage was to choreograph a Dickinson poem. And she had particular gestures that corresponded to to images, to places in the poem. And she showed us the gestures, performed it for us, spoke the poem, and then performed it again. It was just stunning.
Yeah, this one was improvising. She was improvising
Nice.
to it. It was stunning, I think is the right word.
If you have a video of it, share it with us, Don. And I want to get two more
I do.
comments. I want to get two more comments, and then we'll pivot. Dan and Li Xin.
Well, I'm just wondering something, and I mean, I have, other than having the students look for settings of poems and musical settings of poems and play them and ask, what do you think that person hears in that poem? I've done more with visual apprehensions of poems, but I know like Emily has a great assignment she's written about for the bulletin, and various other people have written about them, and I'm always Marianne Noble had a student do yoga, but the only one that I've done is we looked at Joseph Cornell's box toward the Blue Peninsula and talk about it and say, it's not a picture of a poem. So what does it do? And then I have to make Cornell boxes. And I didn't realize they would all just do them virtually, didn't do them electronically. I thought they would actually get shoe boxes. But that's at first. But that was better because they could be freer. But I always want to, for me, and this is going to be probably a horrible bias, I always want to come back to words. I need them to be able to talk about it. In part, that's, if I'm grading or something like that, well, I can't grade, yeah, it's pretty. But I also think I need some assurance that they have thought about why they do it in a particular way. And I don't know if that's right or not. And I'm not probably never going to have to test myself, but I wonder what other people think about that. Do you have to come back to words when you do these assignments?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so too.
You do, absolutely. I'm not sure of too many things, but I am sure of that. It's not the only thing, but the philology, is loved philology. It's and that's at the center of things, and it's not easy for the students who are not growing up reading in the ways that they used to, and not reading in poetic form, and not reading. They don't have a lot. So they're working in the dark in lots of ways. And I think it's important to share the love of language with them. Just the delight that it's not secondary to the visual or secondary to this, or something is more immediate than language or more expressive in some way, because they're they're thrilled with visual and comfortable there, more comfortable than maybe 19th century people were. And so I do think that it's really important to come back to the pleasures of language.
Yeah, and to get them to articulate their choices, and they have to do that in words. They can't do another visualization of the visualization, right? They have to go back and think about what that process helped them see about the words. Li Xin.
Yeah, I am also doing a lot more visual approach, but the really fun one I have ever tried is a culinary approach, where I ask my students to bring food that was mentioning Dickinson poem to celebrate her birthday. So some students brought chicken wings, some students brought donuts, and some students brought whiskey and so on and so forth. And you can take your pick, right? Chicken wings because hope is a thing with brothers, right? Donuts because her business circumference. Right? And so on, getting drunk is a lot more common in her poems. So, but that was a fantastic party. I thought it was really fun to get them to talk about why, like, the sensuous experience is very much embedded in her poetics there. Yeah.
No, inebriate of air. Yeah.
Air.
I'm gonna steal that idea, Alicia, and that's so great to think about the food that people would bring in. Elizabeth, your hand was up.
Yeah, that's such a great idea, Alicia. I mean, because it gets them to think about states of being, I mean, being the inebriate, being, overwhelmed, being eager, anxious, nostalgic, whatever it may be. I love that idea. And this is so eye-opening. I have to say, I also share that thinking that the students enter into these poems maybe I've used the visual too, and you can't dismiss the fact that the visual has to come back to the language. You're absolutely right, and because that's where all of the interest is, and all of the ambiguity, and I've had students read them from so many different perspectives. There was a reference to the poem, I almost stepping almost straight, right? That's the last line. I think it was Emily Sealbinder who referred to it. And life stepped almost straight. I had a student who was admittedly under recovery for, right, he was an alcoholic. And he took every opportunity to tell people this because that was obviously part of his process and when he read that poem, he said, "That's it. I see this. Like she is speaking to me." And he wrote a beautiful paper about that because sometimes I ask them, think about a way in which you respond to this personally. But then, of course, you need to go the next step and explain not just how you connect with it personally, but why you appreciate it artistically. The other thing I did was I posted in here really quickly an assignment that I've done in this seminar. And I just love these assignments. I want to look at all of them because they're all such great ones. The one that, that you're all putting up here. And this is more focused on words, and it wouldn't work for every class, but it was an upper level seminar. And this is the one that Ellie visited. If those of you who were at the memorial reading might know. But I just wanted to dig into the etymologies, and I wanted students to think about, so like, what are the words that she chooses? What types of words does she choose? Because I think that that's a way for them, again, to get into the idea of rhythm in language, right? I mean, the use of a Latinate word followed by an Anglo-Saxon monosyllabic word. I wanted them to understand all of that about the fact that, prose can have rhythm, but poetry is built around it too. And so I asked them to start taking a list of a vocabulary of Dickinson's poems. What words strike them? Which ones does she seem to use a lot? Which ones does she use less of? And then at least in one case to check the dictionary, the Webster's 1844, and I posted the link for them. And I have to say, I got some very interesting responses, including one for, I think so I gave them some suggestions here, but one of the students looked up globule, and it's all related to the idea of blood. And there is a rather medical definition that Webster provides that I thought was fascinating for the Civil War poems. So it just started to open things up in a really fun and fascinating way, and got them to think about latent or hidden meanings in some of these poems. So
thank you, Wendy. I think you need to bow out now.
Yeah, I think I have to run to the NEH program, but just wanted to thank you all so much for experimenting a little through Zoom and for everything that you contributed to the Padlet. I look forward to looking at everything that you do and your joyful poems. So thank you, and see everyone soonish in person, I hope.
Can the Padlet be shared with us, or do we?
Yeah, we'll find a way to share it, maybe to the website, if everyone's okay with that. Discord. Yeah, we'll make sure you have the link.
Great.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good
Bye,
evening.
Wendy. Sorry, folks, you're stuck with me, but we've got some hands. I don't know the order, so I'm just going to go on my screen. So I apologize if your hand was up first. Felicia Nimue.
Thank you. First, I want to apologize for not using the hand function before. I just figured out how to use it. Also, since I've had some intermittent internet problems, if this is a point that's already been made, I'll apologize for that too. But a strategy I learned about actually by reading a short story whose title I don't remember involved a class of high school students where they were asked to memorize the poem I'm Nobody and recite it over and over and recite it to each other. And they were all able to do it, and they had the poem with them. So I think having people memorize short poems is a very good idea.
Thank you. Renee.
Oh, I want to put in a plug for in this age of different relationships to reading. The Google slide deck where they have to share a marginal note at the beginning of every class and then explain it. It gets them to write a marginal note on a poem. It doesn't take very long. They just kind of go through and explain what they noticed. And that sort of teaching close reading in 2026 is different than it was in 2016. And so to just sort of have them do it over and over again. I noticed something. I noticed something. I noticed something. I really, it was, what's the word of the day? Revelatory. It was really helpful in my teaching.
Can you explain Google Slide Deck? I do that with Google Doc, have them annotate and before.
So it's just as easy with the slide deck. You set the slide deck up and you make the first slide say, please take a photo of an annotation and add it as a slide. And then when they open the link, they can easily create a slide that's a photo of an annotation. They don't have to write anything on the slide. They just take a photo of an annotation. But then in class time, and it doesn't take long, each student says what they noticed, why they made that note. And it's been remarkably helpful just to get them in that habit of noticing small things, which good readers do.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. Nancy.
I had a hard time figuring out Padlet, and I'm trying to adapt to a new iPad, which won't do what I want it to do. However, it suddenly occurred to me that I have some pretty good teaching techniques that I used with fourth, fifth, and sixth graders when I was doing. We acted out poems like we would do the train and act out going by the shacks and so on. And I started early, took my dog. I have little costumes that I did. I actually did an EDIS thing with it once, and I adapted it to elementary kids. And that was back when I was teaching, so I did do some of it in my classroom. I couldn't do it in my regular English classes because I was told what to teach, and that was that. And there was no Dickinson. But in my ESL class, I could do it. So that's, thank you.
That's a
I
good
have to
point.
say, you and Bill doing I started early, took my dog in Minnesota is one of my really happy memories of an EDIS meeting.
Of Chris and Georgie and somebody else, and Georgie was the dog.
Yeah. That was great. I did a strip tease to This World Is Not Conclusion. Not completely taking my clothes off, I might add, but yeah, that was a wonderful workshop.
Yeah, well, I will not be doing that in my classroom, the striptease.
I stripped down to
that is
an Emily
not-
Dickinson t-shirt and shorts. So but there were many layers while the group sang, "This world is not conclusion to a mighty fortress is our God." Jane Eberwein started it. I'm just saying.
Okay. Anyone have any remaining thoughts based on kind of Wendy's great activity and getting us all on Padlet? All right, then I guess I will do my thing, which will hopefully not be boring, but oftentimes there are a couple of things that I did want to preface before I kind of share a presentation and have us go through something. The first thing is everyone here is coming to this workshop. Let me preface this first by saying I was up at 4 a.m. because I had to take my son to the airport. So if I yawn, it's not that I'm bored. I'm just very, very tired. There is a kind of martial language that is often used when talking about high school teaching in the trenches, boots on the ground, that kind of thing, and this distance between, let's say, instructing at the college level and what it looks like in high school. Also, some of the conversations that came up earlier today in Renee's talk about what's happening in education today, and I think it's really important to address and kind of informed the poem that I selected and kind of what I did with it, as well as Elizabeth's talk, kind of moving between, we've heard from second, third, fourth grade instruction, or just doing a special kind of push into classrooms, high school and college. All of those are kind of hinges, right, and boundaries and moving between and among. So I've thought about that a lot. And there were a couple of things I thought about with this. Increasingly, at least at the K-12 level in education in the United States, the curriculum is being dictated a bit more. There are scripted lessons that are being given, and I think, Nancy, you had mentioned this, that you were kind of told what to teach.
Well, that was way back in 2000, though, so.
And it got a lot worse. It didn't go the other way. Okay, so it went further entrenched in that. So there is a lot of scripted programs that we're being told. I have a little bit more leeway where I am at City Honors, but I still do kind of need to shoehorn in Emily Dickinson if I do teach her. The other thing that I wanted to kind of bring up is, and I mentioned it briefly when Wendy was talking, is the student population you have in front of you. So for example, right now I'm teaching full day summer school, and my classes are very small. They're taking students from different high schools in Buffalo and kind of merging them into one. And I have, let's say in one class, I have 3 students who arrived in the United States in 2023. And so their language facility in either their native tongue or English, right, is, I don't really even know in their native tongue where they are in terms of their development with language and their understanding of language. So we kind of have to take all that into account when we make up our kind of lessons and assignments. So I just want to share my screen with you, and hopefully this will work. And is everyone able to see my screen? Perfect. And I just want to try and make it full screen. So the reason why you probably have guessed the poem that I selected, because I could not stop for death. And the reason why I selected that poem, which is an odd one, maybe at first to think about in terms of joy, but it's often anthologized and is actually one of the few poems that makes it into the scripted instruction. So that's why it's kind of informed what I've done here. Now, I would not share the essential questions right away. I'm sharing them with you to tell us where we're going. But one of the things that we kind of have to do is, well, what is our question? What are we trying to get at? So I crafted a high school level question and then a college level reframing. So at the high school level, why does Dickinson portray death as a courteous gentleman rather than a frightening figure? What effect does this characterization have on the poem's tone? Possibly maybe a lower level undergraduate. How do Dickinson's choices in personifying and characterizing death challenge readers' expectations about mortality, and what role does tone play in that challenge? So I'd like to, if at all possible, have us take a couple minutes and jot down some notes on this question. Try and pretend that you have never read Because I Could Not Stop for Death, okay? Which it makes it difficult to do in this room. But if you were to personify the figure of death, would he, she, they be a monster or a welcoming figure, and why? So if you could just take a few minutes and just come up with a couple of ideas of how you might personify the figure of death. That might mean relying on things that you've already are familiar with. A lot of my students might say the Grim Reaper kind of figure, but I will stop talking and just take a couple of minutes to think about this question.
Should we drop that in the chat, Wendy?
Oh, you can certainly drop it in the chat. We'll discuss it. You can just take a couple notes on a separate sheet of paper, or you could put it in the chat if that works for you. Either one is fine. And just take another, say, 30 seconds and jot down a few more ideas. If you want to throw, you can call me Wendy. I'm a high school teacher. I've been called everything, so I will respond to pretty much whatever you call me. Trust and believe.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Mhm. If everyone could just take a moment and just throw a couple words in the chat. Mm. Mm. Ooh, I like that, Johnny. Mhm. Okay, so taking a moment to just look through these, I would imagine that my high school students' responses would be far less poetic. Going to be far less. They're going to be things like something that's all in black. They're going to envision the Grim Reaper. They're going to go to what they know, and from there, typically, it's probably going to be something frightening, as most of you kind of talk about. So we've got, um, let's see. Kimberly, shadow, nap, blanket, something that covers and annihilates. All those are great. But as you know, this isn't personification, though. These are actions, things, noun, ideas, and we can move toward that. And part of what you're doing with high school students is getting them to really think about personification and how these images can get them to personification. Don, this might not work with kids, but I remember being there when my mom died. That actually is probably what kids are going to talk about. They're going to talk about their first experience with some kind of death in their life. That's maybe more accessible to them. What do they know? Depends on the time of my life. Great big calm figure, neither monstrous nor welcoming, something else. Broad, enveloping. The Death Eaters in the Harry Potter series, that's one that's going to come up, right? Something that they know, a show, a movie. These are the figures that they're going to kind of gravitate toward. A gentleman caller. Uh, um, in Polish was female, and if I remember correctly, a nurse. That could be either monstrous or welcoming. Form of fungi that are slimy, something unknown, something disorienting. Uh, mm, Light, a pure bright light, not a figure at all. It might be overwhelming. And so that's going to be interesting because you're kind of not really personifying, but you're giving this light. So how could you make a figure from light that gets something? The Terminator, there we go. Well, the Terminator is a form of gentleman caller. I would imagine a woman in silver beckoning toward a Technicolor Oz. All of these are great, but you're going to see that even we did not personify, but we're throwing out all these images, and I'm guessing, I'm not good with math, but the larger percentage are probably not as welcoming. So the reason why I bring that up and I will want students to kind of think about it. I see death as the worst possible thing. They're probably going to gravitate toward that, which is why I think it's going to be important in thinking about what Dickinson does with the figure of death here, because their initial impulse is probably going to be something that is not as welcoming. So that brings me now to joy. What I would probably do for them next is this. So giving definitions of joy. So can any of your images be described as joyful? Give them some different definitions of joy: feeling of great happiness, expression or exhibition of such an emotion, great happiness, a source or cause of delight. So more often than not, what I think students would come up with, there'd be this kind of jarring difference between joy and what they are thinking of. So I do want to, and one of the things that is also helpful, we've talked about visuals. This is only about 3 minutes, but I'd like to play this scene from Dickinson, Meeting Death. Hopefully you can hear that. Can you hear it? No? Okay. All right. There was a problem with hearing it in another. Here, let me just get out of this for a second and see if I can fix it so that.
You need to go to your sound, the little mic on the left, and click on the arrow, and it should have share
sound the side. I'm not seeing the I'm in a Google slide.
Ooh.
And I don't see the sound.
Is there a mute or sound volume button on the clip?
Mm-mm. There is, but it is all the way on.
Okay.
So this is what I'm going to do. If you could just bear with me for a moment. This is another fun part of teaching is technical difficulties.
Sometimes you need to optimize for sound and video, within the setting, which is kind of I was hoping things would work.
You need some of your high school kids here to fix it.
I know, right? So this is, let's see if
just show it right off YouTube if you can get to it.
That's what I was doing just now. So let me see. I am going to share my screen again. Man, it always makes me feel so old when I can't figure out the technology. Now let's see if you can hear this. Can we hear it?
Nope.
No? All right. Well, unfortunately,
we could
has everyone here
imagine.
seen it?
We
Has
could
everyone here
imagine it.
seen-
You could show it.
Has everyone here seen Dickinson, Apple TV's Dickinson? So you're familiar with the death. So I would show that for about 3 minutes because what that does is it shows obviously really what goes on, and then we get to the poem. So let me.
If you like, I could show it.
Yeah,
I can show it.
I've got it up.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
I've got it on my screen too.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to let me share?
Yeah. You should be able to share.
Yeah. Hold on just a second. Okay. It says Google Chrome, but I'm going to do my desktop because I think it's going to work better. Okay. Can you see Haley Seinfeld?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got it as well.
I think your volume was a little low, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'm not hearing it, but
let's see.
Here, I've got it.
Is that better?
Yes.
Nice to see you.
You were late.
Most people would be glad if I never came.
Not me. I always want to see you.
So, mom's gonna get published.
No. I won't allow it.
But you said it was too late to stop it.
My father will burn every copy if he has to. Anything to prevent me from ruining the good name of Dickinson.
My darling. Be the only Dickinson they talk about in 200 years.
You were late.
What you got? People would be glad if I never came.
My poems are never published.
Publicity's not the same thing as immortality.
I always want to see you. Immortality is nothing. All it takes is being very good and well behaved, and then you go to heaven.
So, see, that's not the kind I mean. Mom's gonna get published. Your type of immortality won't come. I will lose. It's gonna come breaking. You said it was too late to stop it.
My father will burn every copy. When will you come for me? Anything to prevent me from ruining the good name of Dickinson. Just for a bribe to take me away from this place.
You'll be the only Dickinson in 200 years. I promise you that.
Even if my poems are never published.
Publicity's not the same thing as immortality.
immortality is nothing. All it takes is being very good and well behaved, and then you go to heaven.
See, that's not the kind I mean. Your type of immortality won't come from following the rules. It's gonna come from breaking. Soon I shall be more so.
When will you come?
There's a war. I come to you every night, my darling. When I shall.
Just for a ride. To take me away from this place.
For many, many years.
When we all fall asleep, why do we
One would think global pop sensation Zara Larson doesn't have to think about money.
No.
But we followed her for a week.
You did what?
And found out she's pretty thrifty.
Thanks?
Busy.
Zara's money-saving guide to free water.
There's a guide?
And soon I shall be more so.
Huh?
There's
Wet
a
it
war
out.
brewing, you know.
Countries that we
Big one.
Summer never.
When I shall divide this nation.
Thank I.
So I buy my clothes secondhand on Depop for cheaper than retail? Yeah.
Concerning Jim.
Are you still hearing that?
Okay, and so that brings us to the end of that clip. So what did you notice about how the actors were in the carriage, in their relationship to one another? Was Khalifa, the figure of death, seem at all frightening, or was there closeness, and how do you know?
Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, the way he's dressed, death reminds me of Dracula.
Yeah.
So the first time I saw it, it felt quite scary because I kept thinking, oh, is this Dracula? And then I started thinking about the way that movie represents Dracula as kind of waiting for the beloved for all time. I don't know whether other people have seen that particular version of Dracula. So that's what it reminded me of. So it was almost as when she says to him, you know, when will you come for me? It sort of reminded me of Dracula, vampires, and so that's what I thought.
I thought it's interesting to choose a black actor
Yeah.
to play the role of death there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was just, I remember, but they look very cozy and comfortable together. I wonder.
How do we know they're cozy and comfortable together?
They're smoking hashishi together? Is that what they're
That's cozy and comfortable. A dance and a meeting, maybe. No, just teasing. But yes, they are. What else? Where are their bodies positioned? Elizabeth.
I mean, they're in the coach together, and she goes to see him, and I'm just fascinated by the problem that Alina Smith has, which is that she is trying to create a multicultural version of Dickinson at a time when the 19th century was very segregated racially. And so the implication here is that there's an interracial relationship, which I also found fascinating.
But why? How do we know that there's an implication of an interracial relationship in terms of their body positioning over the course of that clip? Where she goes, where she sits, where she ends. That's what I want to focus on.
She runs right out to him.
She runs right out to him.
Like in the video of Thunder Road, the MTV video of Springsteen's Thunder Road, and as though there's, she's going away from home, away from security. She gets in, body language is separate at first, and she's looking suspiciously, and then she sits next to him and puts her head on his shoulder. It goes closer and closer. I mean, it's kind of classic seduction. I shouldn't be here, but I want to be,
It is. My students would not say classic seduction, right? But they will start bringing in other things as we did. So if we bring the focus back to body positioning, and there's a whole other conversation about what she's up to with, what's happening with the choices, that there is a Black actor who is death here. I think two things about that. The first thing I think is that my students will see themselves themselves represented more, which is an important thing if you're trying to access something. This is an access point. This isn't the end. And so if we take that 3 minutes and then if I can guide the conversation toward their body language and what they're doing, students are going to, pardon my language, clock, right? The fact that there's a closeness that develops, the fear is gone. She is resting her head on his shoulder. And that's an access point in my mind to helping them understand this kind of repositioning of something that could be scary that Dickinson does in this poem, that he's actually this kindly gentleman. If they can see that, they can understand body language. If my students who don't have as much access to understanding the English language as much as others, that they can understand because that's more universal. Resting your head on someone, we can talk about why we would feel comfortable doing that. So if they can start with that and then we go to Dickinson's poem, that might help them make some more sense of it. Emily, you were going to say something.
I wondered if your students would recognize the particular actor, would recognize the artist. Would that be a familiar cultural reference for them?
Wiz Khalifa, I don't think so much anymore with my students now. Things happen quickly. Who they will recognize is Josh Allen's wife because we're in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's another access point for me. Do you see? Like, I've got to think about all these little things. Like, what are my students going to know? They're going to know Josh Allen's wife, and they're going to be able to understand this because we rest our head on someone's shoulder when we feel comfortable. So if this is death, now we have this. Okay. So this, and we know that the speaker of a poem is not the same as the author. That's something that we have to kind of think about how we are working with that. But if my goal is to get them to understand, because I could not stop for death, this typically frightening figure, often presented as frightening, if I can give them an access point into understanding comfort, rushing towards something, not being afraid of it, then if I go to the language of Dickinson's poem, maybe they're able to understand it just a little bit more. Also, my students may not necessarily know what a coach is, because I've got students that are coming from all over the world with varying levels of language acquisition and even very rudimentary kind of understanding of the 19th century. So I have to be able to give them these access points. So this is one way to do it. Because it's only 3 minutes long, also it doesn't dominate the class. It's dominating this class right now. I'm going to move us on in a moment, but just because I wanted to stop and explain my choices. So students don't have an attention span, but what they do is they can scroll and look at reels. That's like watching a reel. Okay, I've got 3 minutes. They can focus for that 3 minutes. Now we move back to text. And this speaks to what you were talking about, Dan. We always have to come back to language. So all of what we just did maybe could take 10 minutes of my 45-minute class period, maybe 15. Because it takes kids about 5 minutes to find their notebook and pens and get themselves situated. So allowing for all that time, I've got 10 to 15 minutes. I've covered that. I've given them an access point. Now I'm going to share my screen once more to show you where I would go next. Okay. So, so now, oh, wait, that's not where I wanted to be. So here I've got the link we're all familiar with because I could not stop for death. What I would do next is if I take this link and we read it through, we're going to read it through a few times. Typically, I would read it first to ensure pronunciation, to give a little bit more confidence to students who my students may not feel comfortable reading aloud necessarily. But if I read it first, then they've heard it, they can duplicate it. So then I'd have a student read it. And then we would start to go through it, maybe line by line. But first I would ask them what stands out. And again, I am hoping, and my hope would be that what would stand out to them would be words like kindly, I stop for death. I will have students that may not understand that death is the he. They're not going to understand the antecedent for he. So I'm going to have to, hopefully, after they watch that, they will be able to, that will kind of scaffold them to get there to understand who's being kind. Well, you just saw who was kind. So who was he representing? I would have told them this is death. And then they'd be able to understand it through the poem. A carriage. I'm not going to have, for my ESL students, they may not understand carriage, but they've seen it, so they can kind of have a visual. What words describe death? Ultimately, if we remember that kind of essential question that I would get to, that I would have shown them after I did those introductory ones, then I get to, okay, this is the question that we're looking at, and I'll go back to that really fast. Then I would give them, why does Dickinson portray death as a courteous gentleman rather than a frightening figure? What effect does this characterization have on the poem's tone? So then that can open up that discussion about what Dickinson is doing in that poem. And I would have to have an extension activity. What I have done in the past is once we've gone through the poem, they would draw it. So the students would draw the, it's actually kind of, once you get into that and understand the personifying of death, you can kind of see the journey that they go on. And so the students have drawn it. We would have a brainstorm, a list of words. They can answer the essential question using something called the stoplight strategy, which is a way of organizing a paragraph with a topic sentence, giving text evidence, and then explaining that text evidence. And if this were then to become an end of unit assessment, they would craft an essay around that question of imagery, characterization, and tone, hopefully bringing in a couple of other Dickinson poems. So my whole vision there and why I showed that clip is to just give them that visual reference, which is something we talked about when during Wendy's talk, and some things that people have already done. So a lot of my thought process here was, how can we consider this a joyful poem through that personification? The second thing I think about is at the level that many of my students are at, those questions of what is being done in the Apple TV show aren't really what I'm after. What I'm after is an answer to that essential question. I need to get them there. And this comes back to the words. They will be able to have a better footing that might scaffold them to get to the words and then be able to talk about it, if that makes sense. Everyone's looking at me quizzically like they don't.
No.
Yeah, Park.
So one of the things I'm fascinated about, Cheryl, is when you say they would draw this, because I would find it difficult, because this is very much about movement. This poem strikes me as very much. So would they be drawing like a cartoon strip of the movement, or would it be a particular moment in the
I wish I
poem?
had some of the samples I would show you. Typically, what they do is, let's say we have a sheet of paper, a poster board, they'll kind of draw the road. So what they're passing. So it's like you could put the carriage anywhere, but what are some of the things in the other stanzas? For example, if let me just share this with you. So what I mean by them drawing would be this. So if they're drawing it, they would start with, let's say, first stanza. Okay, they know they have to draw some kind of carriage. They're going to draw a figure in the carriage. We slowly drove. Okay, so they're moving, so they're going to make some kind of a road like that first image in the slideshow. We passed the school. Okay, so they can draw a school somewhere along that road. They're going to draw some children, right, playing outside of the school. They're going to, okay, fields of gazing grain. Well, they have to draw some kind of field or represent that. And then they're going to have a sun somewhere. Then, if we get to Gossamer My Gown, my tippet only tool, they have to draw this figure. Now, what is she wearing? Probably some kind of a dress. That's a gown, right? We'll talk about the vocabulary of, what Gossamer would be tool. So they're going to draw like some kind of a loose like dress. And then we get to this, and this is probably my favorite stanza to have them draw. And I'll usually model something. We pause before a house. Well, they can't draw the house. It's that scene. So that forces us to kind of look at that. So as I'm kind of talking them through this first before they draw it, they're going to have this understanding of a house that seemed, and then they've got a swelling of the ground, right? The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Once I talk them through that, what they're able to kind of understand about that is what that is, and they can draw that at the end of this road. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I was just fascinated because it's such a poem about movement. I just was wondering which part of that movement, that journey they would draw. But no, that makes sense.
But they can just draw like, the kind of like road through, and what are they seeing as there's a suggestion of movement as we move through each stanza of the poem, they're able to add something else on that drawing. So it's a way to see a visual for one, I think, difficult concept for a lot of my students. And then once we read the poem and take it stanza by stanza, then they can go and they can articulate that through their own visuals so that they document kind of their understanding. From all of that, they've isolated the key words to be able to draw it. The school, the carriage, all those things, and then the adjectives describing death. And then we can go into how they might write up a short paragraph. I might also, and what I've done in the past is give them sentence frames for that paragraph as a end stop to the lesson. They'll be presented with sentence frames so that they know that they have to provide kind of evidence from the poem. So this is really very different than, let's say, if we were dealing with like higher level students or college students, we'd have to approach it a little bit, obviously, or a lot different. But if we're dealing with younger students or students who don't have as much facility with language or are not as strong in terms of their literacy, then we have a number of different tools. So when I'm always talking about scaffolding, it's like I'd said during Wendy's, if I went into my class of 25 students and like, we're going to read the poem from the bottom up and everyone just chime in, I would lose control of the room. So to be like scaffolded for where I'm coming from with my students. Emily.
A question, and then I have something other that I wanted to ask you about. Do any of them in drawing it put a third figure in the carriage? Is the chaperone immortality, does that figure appear?
No, it has not appeared. Something
so we're not personifying, we're not personifying the chaperone, as it were.
Right. I mean, really usually when students see this, what seems probably quite obvious to us is not obvious. So I need to look at what do I want them to understand? And one of the more difficult things, this one is fairly easy because the antecedent to he is very close in the first stanza, but my students have a difficult time with understanding what the pronoun refers to often. And so because this is close, this is another way to help them with that skill. So when they encounter something that has more distance, they're better able to isolate that. And you had
That
another
actually leads
something you
me
wanted to
to
say.
a sort of a second thing, but I wanted to, and that has to do with the ultimate interpretation of the poem. One of my frustrations over the years in teaching that poem is how many students read it as death is just this gentle going out, and they miss the chill,
Yeah, yeah.
how underdressed she is,
Mhm.
how unprepared she is for this sudden arrangement. And then, there is an eerie quality there. So they want to read it, and this may be indicative of the region in which I've taught, as death is a gentle going out to heaven,
Mm-hmm.
and not as a poem that has this tension in it with the gentleman caller whose intentions are not entirely, shall we say, transparent.
And I think part of that um, is a vocabulary issue. Like they would need to understand if you mentioned the dress, the gossamer, right? They need to understand those words. They don't know what those words mean. So I part of the difficulty that I find is that you have to have that kind of basic understanding before you can go further. I need them to get to the basic understanding right now
And
as
you're
it
working with
stands. So,
ESL students, right?
yeah.
Whereas I'm working with students who've come out of high school where they've read this poem and
Yeah.
interpreted it because the teacher had a secret code book with the secret decoder ring and told them what it was supposed to mean.
But this also reminds me of, and I can't remember exactly what session or where it came up, where it is this kind of process of unlearning, but you still need to kind of learn. I liken it to when I took chemistry in high school. I was taught that there was an electron cloud, but it went like an orbit. It was like a solar system. And then I got into chemistry a little bit more and I realized it's called a cloud for a reason, but you have to have an access point, I think. And then once you get that access point, you can then kind of unpack that to get further into it, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thanks.
But has anyone taught, you've mentioned teaching this poem, any other methods with this poem? And I picked this one because there are like three heavy hitters that I see anthologized in like high school texts. This is one of them. Um, uh, Success, just that's another one. There are like three of them that appear, and no other ones really that are
This one
anthologized.
is I Heard a Fly Buzz included generally?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
I think that those
I heard
two
a fly buzz will
poems,
be.
one of the things I do, and I'm dealing with college students,
Yeah.
is points of view with death. And these two poems come from beyond the grave. And so there's but there are other poems like The Last Night That She Lived, which is, by the bedside from the point of view of the watchers. A Bustle in the House, again, the people who remain. And so there are, with both of these, one of the things that I try to get at is that the I of the poem, the speaker, is already dead and looking back on the death experience. And what's additionally interesting, as we dig deeper, is the fact that we cannot say for certain in either of those poems that the speaker is in heaven. The speaker is somewhere beyond life on, mortality, but it is, and I like to joke that the king in the room in I heard a fly buzz is Elvis, when the king be witnessed in the room. But that's one of the things students have a hard time not realizing that the speaker, is not Emily Dickinson herself. And these are good poems for okay, well, if this speaker is Emily Dickinson, she wrote this poem before she died, so how could that be Emily Dickinson?
Yeah. To give a little bit more context into how this poem has appeared for me, it was given to me in a module that was a week long where I covered this poem. I covered, or in this was also included the inauguration poem by Amanda
Gorman.
Yes. That poem was coupled with this. And a third poem that escapes me because it's been a year or two since I had to teach this module. So it was in 1 week. We were told we needed to teach tone and word choice with those 3 poems. So the reason why I'm trying to express, I guess, part of my frustration is I have a class period that's 45 minutes. I have an objective to teach them tone. I need them to understand that death is personified, to be able to access point it. So in that 45 minutes, I've got to come up with something that's going to engage them personally. What do you think of as a figure of death? A lot of them will say Grim Reaper, or they'll kind of draw from TV or shows some images. I can start with that. I can show them a clip of something so that they can visualize certain things or understand relationships. Then we read the poem. We break down the poem. Then I try and have them draw it, and then their kind of assessment reflecting on their learning is this paragraph where we've been told to use the stoplight strategy, which is basically a scripted thing. That's what I'm working with. So it's like, it's hard for me to really dig under this, like not to be like that. And that's why I started this by saying that there's this kind of martial language that's applied in K-12, like boots on the ground. I'm in the trenches. This is what I'm told to do. And I am doing my very best to get them to understand a poem, many of whom there are words here that they're not going to recognize. They're not going to understand the carriage. They're not going to be able to even visualize a lot of that. And then I'm coupling this with a poem that is entirely different by an entirely different poet with an entirely different tone. And then I'm saying, hey, kids, we're going to do a quick 180 turn. We're going to look at this poem. We're going to talk about the tone and word choice here. So it's not easy. It's also, it doesn't allow for a lot of these like really rich discussions. So it's always kind of frustrating because whenever we're in a group like this, where you can ask these questions, I'm in a room full of Dickinson enthusiasts who are going to say these poetic things. That's not what I'm getting in my classroom. Okay, so I've got to figure out where are they? How can I meet them partway and bring them maybe a couple steps closer?
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at. So it kind of goes back to the unlearning that maybe it was Renee's. I think it was Renee's talk that the conversation came up about unlearning. And so everyone's like, these high school teachers are, yeah, because that's kind of where I'm at. And that's kind of how I've got to get through what I'm told to do and deviate where I can. Lishan.
Yeah, I hear your pain there because kind of
Isn't that
remind
obvious?
me the conversation I think that was brought up earlier about how Dickinson's poems can be both interesting and challenging in a second language classroom where some of the students don't really have English as their, even for native speakers, her poems can come across as a bit obscure, esoteric to some point.
They
And
don't
now
even
you're
know the level
dealing
of
with
facility in their native tongue that they have. So there's no way I can address that with a couple of different languages that I don't know. I can't even gauge that. And the support teacher that will come in is not a Dickinson person necessarily. So, there are a lot of moving parts to it. which is tough, which is why I asked at the very beginning. I got cold, so I threw on a sweatshirt. I'm no longer wearing my conference clasp hemispheres. It's on, but you can't see it.
I'm unfortunately rather warm. I had to take that off, but thank you.
But in some ways, Cheryl, in some ways, isn't this? I mean, I have not taught that population really. I've taught all college, spent my life with 18-year-olds, but never any 16 or 17-year-olds. But in some ways, that's what makes Dickinson really interesting to teach at that level when you can make it work, because there isn't as much in some ways that you have to know, because a lot of the ways she uses languages are so unfamiliar. And you don't, what I could never teach, begging your pardon, Parek, is Shakespeare, because I really needed them to be able to read those sentences. And even my best students could not. And I felt, at 18, at 2021, yes. And so, whereas with Dickinson, you don't have to be putting together the sentences. You really can work the way Wendy was, line by line, word by word, and just vertically off the page, rather than having to get some sense of what one character is saying to another character. And the compactness allows for that, at least when it works. And of course, it doesn't often work. It often doesn't work, rather. Eliza? You're muted, Eliza. Eliza,
you're muted. Muted.
I'm finding this really fascinating, Cheryl, and thank you for this. You're pushing back against the assumption of a certain kind of sophistication and of a certain kind of context that doesn't exist, especially for public school teachers. And I'm in North Carolina. I think we're ranked 49th in the nation right now. So when students are coming to university, the same situation is true, right? In the first year classroom. I mean, I know they've been through the public schools, but the conditions of teaching are almost impossible at this point. So it would be helpful, I think, for public university teachers or just university teachers to be more aware of the process of the pedagogical process and the requirements that underpin education in the earlier years. And what I particularly got from your talk, because you're talking about I could not stop for death, I actually now ban that poem. The students that cannot write about that poem because they use AI, and they always want to talk about the personification of death in that poem, and they think it's like a new idea, but like 20 out of 25 students all decide they want to write about that poem when we talk about death, and they want to write about personification. So it's clear that you have the problem with ChatGPT and them spending 5 minutes just funneling their, funneling the assignment through ChatGPT. So I want to affirm for you that the problem's only becoming more exponential that you're talking about. And students are trying to even avoid learning how to write. I mean, I don't blame them. It's not their fault in any way, but it's a new challenge. And it's created by the kind of conditions it seems to be created and informed by the conditions that you're talking about in the classroom. So these are really, really important things to talk about, I think. And I really appreciate your sharing the conditions of
I don't mean to be such negative. I hope I'm not coming
No,
across
no,
as
no, you're
terribly
not coming.
negative.
I'm
I'm
not
just
being
trying to
negative
be
either.
very
I don't mean to sound
clear.
negative. I don't mean to sound negative at all. I love teaching. I
Yeah,
love teaching
yeah.
Dickinson, and I love teaching these students. But these are the conditions they're swimming in.
Mhm.
And so it's good to be in touch with those realities, but and remain joyful.
Yeah.
It's not that
So,
easy.
um, so, and I think too, the problems with AI, um, are like students too, and this is even for students I would consider to be I don't want to say that are drawn to language, that have facility with language, that are oftentimes students, when confronted with something that is very different or not as literal, automatically will go to ChatGPT. And then when they come back to me with something that is really insightful, I know they didn't do it because I've seen the work that they'll produce in class. So I need to know what they can do. And it's very obvious when they've looked at something else and it's like, oh my God, wait a minute, this is brilliant. Not to say that my students aren't brilliant, but it
In
is
this way.
very easy to know that when they have used tools that I don't want them to, I don't want to say bad. I'd rather get something that wasn't so great, that was more genuine, so that I have something to work with to move them through. And they don't want to, the students want to do well. They need grades. They're all about points. They're all about, what do I need to do? How do I get an A? And that kind of influences them toward doing, because they want to do well. So if I can say, let's not do so well, I'd rather see things that we can talk about that are genuine so that I know where you're at.
I
If
do
I
that
don't know
too.
where a
I'm
student is.
recalibrating my grading that way. If they're doing their own work, like with a pencil and a piece of paper, they get points for that.
Which is why I'm always asking when folks are saying, we've talked about this, or whenever, teachers get together and they're talking about in our Padlet ideas, I'm always like, okay, that teacher who said they were going to try it, did you check back in with them? How did it go? I feel like we spend a lot of time generating these great ideas, but how did that work? What were the hiccups? How can it be refined? What worked for you? But often I feel that in my experience, what has happened is we come up with these great ideas and then it's off in the void and they all sound brilliant, but what happens in the classroom? What happens when it actually is put into practice?
Can I
Yeah,
say,
Elizabeth.
this is we have a term for this in my department, which is called failing big. In other words, sometimes it's better. This is a poet friend of mine who says this, to do something and not succeed at it, because of course, in learning how to do it better the next time, you fail big. And that's actually much more productive. I think we're all facing this problem about AI, and it continues to generate a lot of discussion at my university, and I know at everybody's universities. And so one of the ways that uh, it's not easy at all, but one of the ways that I and other people I know have tried to deal with it is to circumvent the availability of AI by doing more writing in the classroom, which of course takes more time because now I'm doing less reading, right, of the text. I'm teaching less literature and teaching more writing ultimately. Also having them reflect personally on the work. Like when I mentioned that poem, We Grow Accustomed to the Dark. So part of that came from my trying to get students to connect with the works by asking them to think about a poem with which they connected in some way personally. And I've done this just as an icebreaker at the beginning of classes, just like, okay, so out of the reading for today, think about and one poem that you connected with in terms of your own personal life. And it was a revelation to me, to use that word. It was amazing to see how students were able to connect their own lives so in such diverse ways to some of these poems. And so that student had, who was in recovery, felt immediately like that poem spoke to him and he was able to write about it. But that's something that, of course, ChatGPT can't produce for them. And so that's one way to do it. It's an obvious way. But of course, from there, he needed to talk about, okay, so then how do you appreciate it? What is it that, how does the language reach you in very specific ways that you can then elaborate on in the poem? So those are, again, this is an uphill battle that all of us are dealing with, but I really admire what it is that you're trying to do and the fact that you're meeting them where they are, as Eliza said. You are acknowledging the context of their lives and bringing that into the classroom with you, because I think that's the only way that we really teach well. So
on the subject of failing big, I was fortunate to have the freedom to do my own course design, and particularly later on, I abandoned traditional grading because I had so many students who were so concerned about those initial grades that they weren't learning. So particularly in my writing classes, in my Dickinson class, I went to a portfolio system in which they turned things in. There were penalties for being late, and there were certain criteria, that had to be met. But at the end of the semester, they would take material, revise it, turn it in with a cover note talking about how they'd done that. And it was enormously satisfying teaching, because what brought both my students and me joy was how they saw their improvement, how they had grown, how they saw the work earlier as now something that could be improved. How that translated into the next class they took, who knows? But it really made a huge difference, and in my joy in teaching in that last decade, I just said, all right, that's it. I'm not doing it this way anymore.
Well, I think the most success I've had over the course of this year with my city honor students wasn't with Dickinson, but I snuck in a Washington Irving unit and gave them a final menu assignment. And I had students who would not complete final essays for me, but turned in 8 to 10 page short stories that were brilliantly written, that used some of the things that I wanted them to do. And they were so happy because they had not had a creative writing assignment since they were in grade school. Because how we're structured is very rigid. And it's always like final essay where they have to do that seems so important that there was no room for play. So they were doing this, they were really loving it. They had an access point where we could watch Legend of Sleepy Hollow, those kinds of, I did it around Halloween. I got the history teacher to be the headless horseman. I was Ichabod Crane for Halloween, and so like that kind of fun could happen, but it's because I snuck it in and it left me short from the have-tos. So I fear that over these 25 years, when I first started, I had so much freedom. I was frightened because my first day of teaching, they handed me one sheet of paper and said each grade level what term I was supposed to teach them. And that was the only guidance I got. So I was scared because it was like, pick something. But by my second year, it was wonderful because I was able to kind of craft things that made sense to them. Now we're very kind of programmed. And each school is going to have a different kind of, even for an IB school, they don't get to document their or show their facility with language through creative projects. They're doing long-term papers. It's not about enjoyment. And then if we take, sorry, now I sound super negative, but even societally, globally, how many people are reading? I've read studies that it's like such a small percentage of folks have even read a book in the last year. There's like a small percentage that are buying all the books and reading all the books. And what are the other percents doing? Right. And
Yeah,
so
I'm
that
losing
kind of
track of the joy here, I've got to confess.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Let me break in here.
You mean the joint that Death was passing back and forth?
Just for a second, and I know some other people I think had wanted to contribute here, but I need to figure out. I obviously didn't plan this afternoon very well, and it was because something I thought was going to run way long had to be moved and this kind of thing, but there still is an item on the agenda in the program, and that's Jane. And Jane has prepared it with great difficulty to herself because she had so much else to do, and it didn't end up being what I had envisioned for that. But that's fine. I do hope that some people will still be around to listen to her. Park, what are you thinking?
Yes, so I think definitely it's going to get really late for me, and I will stay up. But I would love a break now if it's possible to have a 20-minute break now. So,
sorry.
So I will. But at a certain stage, I might put my camera off because it will be getting towards midnight. So, and I have to work tomorrow.
Right. Oh, goodness. Yeah. Yes. No, that's right. And I really wish, and then the Renee's session we were going to do differently, and then for various reasons that wasn't going to work, and so that one was shorter. I'd have loved to have Jane like 2 hours ago, but this is where it is, and she has prepared it, and we will be a fit audience.
This actually has been a wonderful experience.
What?
I know you're eating yourself up with your overthinking.
Yeah.
Right. And you're eating yourself up with, well, this went wrong and that went wrong and this went wrong. This workshop,
everything's great. Let's just say goodnight for 20 minutes. And